Right, my husband asked me to make him oatmeal cookies. So we're starting out with a cup of room temperature butter, which in my kitchen right now means that it's really soft. And to that we're adding a half a cup of packed dark brown sugar and a half a cup of regular white sugar. And then we will beat these together until smooth. And honestly, I probably do this just fine without the stand mixer, but I usually do cookies in the stand mixer. So the other thing I like to add at this point is a quarter of a teaspoon of salt. Just a little bit of salt. It doesn't need to be much. And if you use salted butter, you can omit the salt completely. And then you'll break in 2 eggs. And let that combine until it's nice and light and fluffy. And I can actually turn up the speed just a smidge and get that all together. So I'm going to, I do have vanilla extract. I was going to say I might use lemon extract if I don't have any vanilla extract handy. And I will often not even measure this. I will just glug it in there, but generally I want about a teaspoon, more or less. I also want 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And as you'll see, I'm not measuring super carefully because it doesn't need to. I like to add in the spices, and I am using a pumpkin pie spice mix to this. So I like to add in the spices during this phase to let them get fully fatted in. And I am going to add in 2 teaspoons of this pumpkin pie spice blend that I'm using. And finally, I'm going to take the speed back just a little bit and go ahead and add in, these are old-fashioned oats or thick oats, and I'm adding in 1.5 cups of this. And again, not precisely measuring. I'm really bad about that with baking because I tend to bake by what it looks like rather than what it necessarily measures out. And if you want to be very accurate with measuring, you want to weigh, not do volume measurements. However, that still is going to have problems because here's the first cup of flour going in. Because sometimes these measurements depend on how much humidity you have going on in your kitchen, which let me tell you right now, after a storm, is considerable. So I'm now adding in a further 1/2 cup of flour. And you don't want to let this mix too long. What I am doing, however, is looking at it and thinking that I'm going to add in just about another 1/4 cup of flour. So that's a total of 1 3/4 cups for today. And that looks about right to me. So very simple, very, very easy. Sometimes instead of pumpkin pie spice, I will use garam masala, which adds a really interesting spice blend to this. And we think of that as being a savory spice in Indian dishes, but it works beautifully in pumpkin pies and also in oatmeal cookies. I don't add raisins or chocolate chips because my husband does not prefer them, but you could mix either of those in, probably not both, at this point, and it would be very good. So now I am going to spoon this out onto a cookie sheet. So how I usually do my cookies to drop them onto the cookie sheet is I pick them up by a teaspoonful and then I just drop them on with the other spoon. And I have cookie scoops. They don't work very well for me. So I almost never use them. I have teaspoons in the pantry, and this just is quick and easy for me. This recipe will make about 3 dozen cookies, roughly, depending on how much I scoop out. And as you'll see, I just made that cookie ball a little smaller. You'll learn with practice what size you need, how much you're going to want on, and you'll see that I have a parchment paper sheet on the pan because that's about right for not sticking, and it allows me to rapidly rotate through batches. I can just slide the whole sheet, cookies and all, onto a cooling rack once I take this out of the oven. I have the oven preheated to 350 degrees, and I will be baking these for about 10 to 13 minutes, giving them a good check there. As soon as the edges start to go golden brown is when you want to pull them out of the oven, and I usually let them sit on the tray for another minute or two after that and then move them to a cooling rack. They do continue to cook internally, so you don't want them completely cooked through unless you want really like cakey cookies. They can get dry though, so you have to be careful. This is what the cookies look like when they come out. As you can see, they're just a little bit golden brown at the edges, and if I poke them on the top, they're firm. So they will sit here for a couple of minutes, and then I will move them off to a rack to finish cooling while the other batches bake. And then we're done, and they can be eaten, best with milk.